I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It's Friday. We have already started week 4 of the NFL season. It is officially October on Sunday. This was the last of the September games. Dennis, does it feel like the season is flying by?
The season's not flying by? I mean,
No,
heck, we're
like it's
way through. You know, at my age, every day flies by. So... yeah, I guess we got a 9:30 a.m. game to look forward to, Eastern.
Well, as Green Day said, wake me up when September ends. It's going to end real early for NFL fans who have to get up. You know, at least for you, it's like you can get up at 8 o'clock and make the game. If you live in California, you better get up at 6 a.m. and check those lineups, or you better just pull your any questionable Falcons and Jaguars now. Last night, last official game of September, first official game of week 4, the Detroit Lions went into Green Bay and came away with the 34-20 victory. Dennis, David Montgomery was on the fence about whether he was going to play all week. He did play. He saw 32 carries, 121 yards, 3 touchdowns, also caught 2 passes. On the flip side, you know, Jahmyr Gibbs had a couple of okay games with Montgomery out, but last night, 8 carries, 40 yards, so 5 yards a carry. He did catch 4 passes, but for only 11 yards. When Montgomery is available, is it time to kind of moderate your expectation for Jahmyr?
Yeah, I think so. The reality of the situation is that if Detroit gets a lead, they want to grind clock. You know, they know that on the road, Jared Goff struggles. The defense, while improving, still has some opportunities and can be susceptible to giving up points. So Dan Campbell, when he gets the chance, they get a lead, he's going to lean on David Montgomery. You know, Montgomery's not being efficient, but he's getting the job done. He got 3 touchdowns. I guess I should take that back. A lot of the runs he had were short by nature because they were, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 3rd and goal from the 1, 2nd and goal from the 1, things like that. They even if he broke through, they were only going to count for 1 or 2 yards. So his YPA may have been a little bit better had that not been the case, but some of it was, they needed a yard and he was sticking his nose in there and getting a yard and a foot. Montgomery's not going to run away from people. That's never been his thing. He's got great vision, good lateral ability. But when it comes to Gibbs, I think we need to look at him like 2022 James Cook. You're going to have a couple games, few games maybe where he provides you with nice production. If Montgomery is out, and it wouldn't surprise me if Montgomery misses more time in the future just because he's playing a role where he's going to get hammered on. And it was admirable that he came back after being out with the big deep thigh bruise. Gibbs is 199 pounder. Unfortunately, he's not going to have a lot of 18 to 20 carry games. It's just not in his future. I don't think we believed that at any point leading up to the draft. After he was drafted, I do think we felt like he was going to get maybe some Austin Eckler type of pass volume, and at some point he might. But yeah, I don't know if did you hear about the new gambling rules today?
No.
Well, Jamison Williams has been reinstated 2 games early. They've changed.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about the penalties for gambling.
Yeah. And so Williams has been reinstated. Titans
He
lineman.
will be reinstated. He's eligible on Tuesday.
Yeah, after this week. Well, they've already played this week. So
I know, but he still, I mean, if they were practicing this weekend, he still couldn't practice. That's what they said after Monday.
Yeah. So, he's coming back a couple weeks early, so that may open up some things in the passing game.
It's good because Marvin Jones is a rumor.
Yeah. So I like Gibbs, but you have to take it for what it is. He's a flex play at this point.
Well, and that's why, if you would have told fantasy managers Detroit was going to run the ball 41 times in this game, pre-game, probably would have been super pumped. But you had one big run play to Khalif Raymond and then 32 carries to Montgomery. I mean, it would be nicer if you were seeing a little bit of a more even split, but I guess that is the dream. For the Packers, Aaron Jones came back, didn't do much. Christian Watson made his debut, did catch a touchdown, but really Romeo Doubs, 13 targets, caught 9 passes for 95 yards. He's been kind of their big receiver for the first 4 weeks. Is he starting to be the receiver you want in Green Bay?
Yeah, I think, if you compare them to, let's say, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, Doubs is the Keenan Allen and Christian Watson is the Mike Williams. They're both going to have some big games. Doubs played, 88% of the snaps. Jaden Reed played 67%. In his first game back, Watson only played 46% of the snaps. I do think Watson is going to have some big games. Part of the issue is the low completion percentage for Jordan Love. He's got to get that taken care of. But Doubs is the guy. I think he's at the top of the totem pole right now when it comes to targets. And I think what Watson is going to bring to the table is the explosiveness. What was it? 9 for 95 was what Doubs had. I think those are the types of numbers. 6 for 75, 7 for 70. Those are the types of games I think we're going to see from Romeo Doubs.
Well, let's dive into the rest of the Week 4 slate, and that starts with London calling early on Sunday morning. The Atlanta Falcons 2-1 at the 2-1 Jacksonville Jaguars. Dennis, Week 1, we loved the explosion from Tyler Algier, and it looked like he and Bijan were going to split it back there. The 2 weeks that have followed have not been kind if you started Tyler Algier in fantasy. What are you doing with the backfield going into Week 4?
In a perfect world, you're like, oh, well, it's going to be great because they're running the ball, so that means they have the lead. Bijan's going to get the passing work from the backfield. It's touch-wise, you're probably looking at a 60-40 split. Algier is going to get run. When they get up, if the Falcons get a lead, Algier is the guy they're going to try to grind it out with. Bijan is probably he's like Eckler plus. So he's great in the passing game, but he's got the size Eckler lacks in the running game. But Arthur Smith still loves the big back. He keeps thinking back to Derrick Henry, and Algier is closer to being that guy than Bijan Robinson is. So he's going to get some touches. I feel like Algier is somewhere 10 to 14 touch per week guy, most of them on the ground. Bijan is going to be a 14 to 18 touch per week guy, probably with them being split 55-45 ground to air. They're both usable, but we're not getting the top end. A lot of people were pegging Bijan to be the RB1, and he could go on a run, whether regardless of whether or not Algier misses time, we could see Bijan just it click and Bijan starts putting up crazy numbers because he has that ability. But for now, I think you got to trust what you're seeing. We're 3 games into the season. Trends are starting to emerge. And one of the trends we see in Atlanta is that Tyler Algier is still going to be a thing. But if you want to roster one of them, Bijan's still the one you want.
For the Jaguars, Calvin Ridley had that huge game 1. He's gotten targets, but we haven't seen great production in week 2 and 3. Zay Jones out again. Can they finally get him going and get themselves back on the right track?
Yeah, I think they can. Much like Jordan Love, Desmond Ridder is struggling a little bit with his accuracy. I think they're not Ridder. We're talking about. I saw Ridley and my mind went back to the Falcons.
Trevor Lawrence.
So
it's even worse.
No, I believe in Lawrence much more than I believe in Ridder. I think Ridley is going to be just fine. It was a weird matchup against the Texans because the Texans have had their number. And to some extent, I felt like they would be able to shake it off. Second year in Peterson's system. The Texans with a new coach, new scheme, new quarterback, and generally not being very good. I felt like there was a chance that the tides would turn. They didn't this week. I think long term they will against the Texans. But Ridley, he leads the wide receivers in routes runs, ADOT, air yards, first read targets. He's still the guy you want there. You're going to get some games where Christian Kirk pops off. Zay Jones will have a couple games too. Evan Ingram. But by and large, that offense is going to put up points via yards, touchdowns. It's going to be good for fantasy. I'm not too concerned with Calvin Ridley.
I am taking the Jaguars.
So am I.
Next up, what I think might be the game of the week, the 3-0 Miami Dolphins at the 2-1 Buffalo Bills. Big battle in the AFC East. Dennis, last week, Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane were incredible. It looks like Salvon Ahmed is officially questionable. Jalen Waddle has been cleared. But when it comes to the running backs, this is the last week probably before Wilson gets activated for week 5. Are you firing up Mostert? Are you firing up Achane? Are you firing them both up?
Yeah, I think this week it's a little more iffy because the Bills' defense is pretty good. And they get Jalen Waddle back. So, the Miami Dolphins offense is not afraid of anybody. They're going to go out there and they're going to do what they do. And because they have that multitude of weapons, it can keep you off guard. I think for this week, I know Salvon Ahmed is supposed to be back or close to being back, but I think Devin Achane is going to still provide that spark he provided last week. Raheem Mostert, he's the lead back right now. I think when Wilson gets back, it's going to be murky for a couple of weeks until it shakes out. But I think Devin Achane, H-A-N,
however you say it,
is, toe chain. He's establishing himself at 188 pounds. He's not gonna consistently carry the ball like he did last week. Now it's easy to say, well, if they can't touch him, why not? Because they will. Teams will figure it out, and they'll put some heat on him. Last week was a perfect storm. I just think you have to risk it as a flex with Achane because of the upside. He may only get you 8 touches, but he could get you 70 yards and a touchdown or 2 in those 8 touches. So when I look at, even if Wilson comes back and takes over the number 2, I think Achane is still in flex consideration each week just because of the spark that he can provide.
For the Bills, the passing game runs through Stephon Diggs. He's seen 32 targets, caught 25 passes. Elsewhere, there's 4 players that have double-digit targets, but only, 9 receptions in 3 games for Davis, 7 for Deontay Hardy, 11 for Kincaid, 7 for Dawson Knox. I know you've been kind of in on Davis. Last week he did have the big touchdown, but that was literally his only catch. How confident are you starting in any receiver that's not named Stephon Diggs?
I think Davis, I think Kincaid, they're people you consider flexing. I'm comfortable with Davis. I think he's a 5 to 6 target per game guy. Some weeks he's going to convert 1 or 2. Other weeks he's going to convert 4 or 5. The big play opportunities are there. As your last flex, that's what you're looking for, and Davis provides that. Kincaid is starting to usurp Dawson Knox, but Knox is still producing. He's not getting the yardage and not quite as many catches, but he's getting the end zone looks. Eventually, I think that does float over to Kincaid, and Knox becomes the clear number 2 tight end. But they run that 11 and a half set with the 2 tight ends with Kincaid flexed out. So I think you can flex Kincaid. I think in good tight end matchups, you may want to start him as your tight end even, but I'm still on the Gabe Davis train. I think he's going to have a good year this year. You just have to understand that there's going to be weeks where you get single-digit points.
I am taking the Buffalo Bills.
I'm going to go with the Bills also. It's a tough call.
There are 4 teams in the NFL that don't have wins, and they are all playing each other this week in the first of the Depression Bowl matchups. The 0-3 Denver Broncos, fresh off a 50-point loss to the Dolphins, are at the 0-3 Chicago Bears, fresh off a 31-point loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Dennis, for Denver, how are you feeling about Jerry Jeudy? Coming into the season, people thought he was going to be kind of their big receiver, but Ben Sutton the last few weeks, Jeudy had 3 for 25 against the Commanders, did catch 5 for 81, mostly in garbage time last week, but also had a fumble. How are you feeling about him in your lineups?
I mean, Jeudy kind of feels like a little smaller version of Gabe Davis to me. I think he's going to start to produce. The team is still figuring out how to play for Sean Payton.
Or how to play football. You could just put it
at that. Honest. They're still trying to, Sutton's getting it because Sutton's getting the ball. He's in that Mike Thomas role. So he's kind of getting his opportunities. And, he's kind of fumbling them away himself. I'd like to see Javonte Williams get a little more of the Alvin Kamara work volume, but that hasn't come to fruition quite yet. But I think Judy's he's a wide receiver 4 for me, with some upside. Any given week, I think you could see him put up 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I think he's a guy that I'm looking more as a 4 for 45, 4 for 50 kind of guy, just because he hasn't produced consistently.
Yeah, it does seem like they're targeting Sutton a lot, and they've also been making noise that they're going to go to Mims more, and he does seem to be a big playmaker, so I don't know what that means for.
He's the Rashid Shaheed of that Denver Broncos.
For the Bears, what are you doing with the backfield? It seems like Foreman's kind of out of the mix. They've been splitting carries with Roschon Johnson, Khalil Herbert. Neither of them has been very great for fantasy.
That whole team has not been great for fantasy. It was interesting to watch last week after Fields, threw the coaching staff under the bus and then tried to pull them back out and say, no, that's not really, that wasn't what I was saying, but yeah, it was what you were saying.
Ignore the tire tread on their backs.
So from the running game, Foreman has fallen to he's the clear number 3. he's getting in there if Herbert gets hurt or if Roshan gets hurt. He's entering Cameron Artis Payne territory. If they're both healthy, it wouldn't surprise me if he's not playing special teams, he's inactive on game days. I like Khalil Herbert, but I think the writing's on the wall. I'm kind of leaning Roshan if I've got to play one of them. I think Roshan's the guy I want because of hashtag PPR. I think Johnson is going to catch more balls than Khalil Herbert. I don't think Johnson has the explosiveness Herbert has, but Herbert also doesn't have the explosiveness that Devin Achane has either. But I feel like if I can get 12 carries, 10 carries, and 6 targets out of Roshan Johnson, I feel like that's serviceable for my RB2, RB3 spot.
I am taking the Broncos.
I'm going to take the Bears. I feel like
if it goes your way, you're going to be doing the show by yourself on Monday and for the rest of time. I might just be.
I just feel like I feel like the Bears with the Broncos running the wide 9 offense. I think it's going to be Justin Fields that runs all over him. Honestly.
The Baltimore Ravens 2-1 at the 2-1 Cleveland Browns. Dennis, I mentioned on Monday, it would seem like it was back to the Lamar Jackson show, having to do a lot with his legs. But in the backfield, Justice Hill looks like he's officially questionable, might be back. They have Gus Edwards. They have Melvin Gordon in case they need somebody to fumble the ball. What are you doing with that backfield?
Avoiding it. Can anyone stay healthy for 2 weeks in a row? That's what I want to know. It seems like they just can't put it together. It's a quagmire. They have lots of parts. And we saw it last year. They brought in Devonta Freeman, who put together probably the better part of a season that any of them did last year. So will it really surprise anyone if Melvin Gordon or Kenyon Drake go on a 6 or 7 game run where they're an RB3? It's a tough call. They're all plug and pray. If you're rostering them, you look at your roster and it's like, I'm looking for anywhere from 3 to 7 points from them.
For the Browns, Watson came up on the injury report today with soreness in his throwing shoulder, which is not what you want to hear. But in the backfield last week, with no Nick Chubb, we saw Pierre Strong get in the mix. Kareem Hunt got signed, got back in the mix. And then there's also Jerome Ford. How are you playing that backfield?
Jerome Ford's the guy, in my opinion. I think Hunt will have a role. I just don't think it's going to be as prominent as a lot of people hope. Shout out to Trash Talker in our listener league. She loves Kareem Hunt, and I'm like, girl. She's like, he was so good. I'm like, it ain't 5 years ago.
He was being the operative word in that sentence.
Right. And she's got Jerome Ford, and I'm like, you need to get Hunt out, put in Pacheco. She's got another starting running back, too, from some other team. She drafted on her Browns fandom. Anyways, I think Ford is the guy. He's going to get most of the volume. Hunt will play his change of pace role. This week, I expect the change of pace to be split between Hunt and Pierre Strong while Hunt plays himself into shape. But by next week, I think it will be, 60% Ford, 30% Hunt, 10% Strong versus 60-20-20 this week.
I am taking the Ravens.
Whether or not Deshaun Watson plays, I'm going to take the Browns because I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson brings an element of chaos and excitement to the offense that the Ravens are going to be like, well, we usually have this guy on our team, i.e. Lamar. Thompson Robinson's a real good athlete. But I just think overall Browns have better weapons, even with a banged up Deshaun and they've got a much, much better defense. So I'm taking the Browns.
Next up, the 1-2 Cincinnati Bengals at the 1-2 Tennessee Titans. Dennis, it looks like Joey B is going to give it a go again this week. How are you playing the Bengals receivers for fantasy?
Well, it seems like T. Higgins is going every other week. Tyler Boyd is about every third week, and Jamar Chase is a guy you can't leave out of your lineup. I think part of it is Burrow he's still getting trust in his calf. He's figuring out what he can do. Is it getting better? How much better is it getting? He's staying in the pocket. It's limiting some of his creativity. For me, you downgrade the receivers some, and so they kind of go from, I guess, Chase from a 1 to a low end 1 to a 2, Higgins from a low end 2-3 to a low end 3 to low end 4, Boyd from a wide receiver 4 to maybe a wide receiver 5. Irv Smith, is he still out? Do you know?
Let me look. I didn't see him on the report.
But they're going to lean on the passing game because the Titans are good against the run, and Joe Mixon is
Smith is still out.
So it'll be those three receivers. So, I think Boyd will be flex worthy. And the receivers may give us the upside this week because Tennessee is so good against the run.
Yeah, they definitely won't be pounding it on the ground. For Tennessee, Treylon Burks is out, which limits their weapons. And if anybody watched game tape, they probably want to limit the amount of time they spend throwing with Ryan Tannehill. So Derrick Henry not getting the good volume the last couple of weeks. Do you think that changes this week?
No, because I think that Bengals will put up a couple touchdowns in the first half, which is going to put them down. And Tyjae Spears is the guy that brings the juice. I think we're seeing the changing of the guard. They don't have enough offensive firepower in the passing game to make other teams respect the passing game and open up things for Derrick Henry. Even when they were still putting 8 in the box against Henry, they still had a passing game that was legitimate, and it's not terribly legitimate right now. They don't have enough weapons, and with Treylon Burks out, they're down another weapon, and Tannehill's just playing bad this year. I don't know. I'm curious to see if when they bench Tannehill, will it be Levis or will it be Malik Willis? Willis looked a little better this camp than he looked a lot better this camp than he did last year. But I'm not sure where they're going with it. Henry, I don't think Henry's an RB1. I think he might struggle to be an RB2 even.
I am taking the Bengals.
I am as well.
Next up, the 1-2 Los Angeles Rams at the 2-1 Indianapolis Colts. Dennis, Matthew Stafford helped him get the Super Bowl, but he's been okay this year, coming in at QB 19 through 3 weeks. How are you feeling about him for your fantasy lineups?
We went from Puka's a plug-and-play Cooper Kupp clone to maybe not. Van Jefferson has disappeared. Tutu Atwell's still playing well. Kyren Williams has cooled. He's still the guy getting the volume for the Rams. He hasn't been as good. I think it'll be a good opportunity this week. I don't think the Colts are outstanding. I think they're okay on defense. For me, I feel like Puka and Tutu are still going to get good enough volume that they're startable. And if you've got Kyren Williams, you probably have to start him just based on the running back landscape. Higbee, didn't he? I thought I heard today on my way home he signed an extension.
He did,
then,
and he's
and then,
questionable with an Achilles injury, which
then showed
makes
up
me
with
nervous.
So it's I'm not counting too. That's definitely something that I'm going to keep following. Stafford, low end QB too, so he's startable in super flex unless you have better options.
For the Colts, the good news is Anthony Richardson got cleared from concussion protocol and should start. The bad news, center Ryan Kelly and tackle Bernard Raymond are out with concussions, and Quentin Nelson, the guard, not practicing and is highly questionable with a toe injury. Michael Pittman's been doing pretty good. How do you feel about the rest of the passing game assets for the Colts?
I like Josh Downs. I think he's had a connection both with Uncle Rico and with Anthony Richardson early in the season. He doesn't have a tremendous amount of upside. He's playing in the slot. It's short area stuff. But I do think you can get, 3 for 35, maybe a touchdown for Downs, 4 for 40 kind of game out of him. So, that's not nothing. But Pittman's having a monster year. Doesn't matter who's behind the center. It will be interesting to see how they overcome being without their center and the left side of their offensive line going up against Aaron Donald. But you've got a 6'5", 240-pound mobile quarterback. I think they're going to roll out to the right an awful lot.
I am taking the Rams.
I'm going to go with the Colts. I think Richardson runs them to the Holy Land.
Next up, a battle of the NFC South, the 2-1 Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the 2-1 New Orleans Saints. Dennis, for the Buccaneers, what are you kind of expecting from the pass offense?
I think they're going to – Baker is going to want – so we've seen this mentality from Baker. He's a fighter. He's like, I was a walk-on. I battled my way up. I became the number one pick. I'm a fighter. And Mike Evans is going against Marshawn Lattimore, and they do nothing but fight every time they get together. And so Baker is going to want to – he's going to, like, he's that best friend that's like, let's go get him. I got you. You come walking in and say, they're out here. Baker's the guy jumping off the couch ready to go jump in the rumble. And I think they're gonna try to go at Lattimore and kind of exercise those demons. That being said, after Lattimore and Evans get ejected, then it's going to be Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, in a very inefficient running game.
Well, they are not a good running team, and the Saints are don't allow a ton of people to run over them, so they're going to have to get in the passing game. Alvin Kamara back, going to make his debut. What are you expecting?
I think they're going to feed him. He wasn't injured; he was just suspended. He's in decent shape. There's no reason. And when you look around that running back room, it's literally the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air standing there looking at an empty living room. When you think about who the running backs are there, Tony Jones, I don't even know who else it is after that.
They've got Kendre Miller.
Oh, but he's banged up though.
He's not on the injury report, so
I thought he was banged up still.
Oh, look, he could. Who isn't banged up? He's not on their final injury report. Jamal Williams is out, but Kendre should be fine.
So I think that they're going to feed Kamara. Wouldn't surprise me if he had a 15 carry, 10 target game.
Would be good. I don't know why, but I'm taking the Buccaneers.
I'm going with the Saints.
I don't even remember. I must have picked the Buccaneers everywhere because I transferred these picks from my official picks. So Bad job by me. Battle of the NFC East, 2-1 Washington Commanders at the 3-0 Philadelphia Eagles. Dennis, Sam Howell looked pretty good the first 2 weeks and looked dreadful in week 3. What do you expect in week 4 in Philadelphia?
I'd love to see a Sam Howell bounce back, but I don't know if Philadelphia is the team you're going to get that against. So I'm
Hey, good news for Antonio Gibson, though. Chris Rodriguez has been ruled out, so they can't place him this week.
Yeah, if only they still had gluteus minimus there. So Howell is a scrapper, but what's happening with Howell is he's holding the ball. He's not getting rid of it. He's not anticipating. He's waiting for stuff to open up, and he's just not trusting what he's seeing. And while I get it, he had a great rushing season at North Carolina, and he has good functional mobility. He's still a 4.9, 5-second 40 guy. He's not fast, and I think that he's gonna go up against an Eagles team that's gonna put pressure on him, and it's not gonna be a great day. If you have Howell and you can not start him, I definitely wouldn't. Now, could he hit a couple plays? Dotson, McLaurin, it's there that you got to take a shot, and he's willing to stand in there and take a beating. He's all for getting sacked. He's on a pace for like breaking David Carr's sack record by like 20 sacks or something right now. So he's a fighter. He's going to play hard. Hopefully he gets through this week reasonably well, and then they can move on to next week where the competition isn't quite as strong, and he can kind of start to put his season together the rest of the way and see if he can grow. Can he grow into being a starting quarterback in the NFL, or are we going to see Jacoby Brissett at some point?
God, nobody wants that. For the Eagles, we've often joked about the 49ers, they're going to feed the running game, and then 1.5 maybe of the passing targets will do well. Feels like the first 3 weeks we've gotten that out of the Eagles. Week 2 was a Devonta Smith game with a couple of big plays. Week 3 was a big A.J. Brown game. Dallas Goedert's still floating around there. How are you approaching those 3 in the passing game?
I'm probably off Goddard. They've got they're 18th in dropbacks, but they've taken the 12th most sacks. So Hurts is trying to make stuff happen, but they're getting to him. He has the 4th highest highly accurate throws, so he's throwing the ball well. He just doesn't throw it very often, and it's looking like when he is throwing it, he's kind of zeroing in on one guy for the majority of the game, whether it's Smith or whether it's Brown. I think they both can produce, but you go into games expecting that, you could be on the short end of the stick with who's getting the targets, and it's just the nature of the beast. Goddard, I don't think they're going to the tight end like they used to. He's going to be okay. He's probably still going to be a tight end 1, but he's probably more in the low end range.
Well, give me the Eagles.
I'm taking the Eagles as well.
Next up is the second Depression Bowl of the week, the 0-3 Minnesota Vikings at the 0-3 Carolina Panthers. Dennis, last week the Vikings traded for Cam Akers. He wasn't a factor. As we expected, he wouldn't be that week. And Alexander Mattison actually had his best game of the season. So how are you approaching the backfield in week 4?
I don't think Akers is going to be a spark this week either. Weeks 1 and 2, Madison went up against a couple pretty good running defenses. And so he had an expectedly tough time. He had a better matchup last week. He performed well. I think it's going to be a situation all season where because of who he is as a running back, he'll perform well in matchups against weak run defenses, and he'll struggle against defenses that are good against the run. It just is what it is. I think we've seen with Cam Akers over the course of his career, he's the same way. So he's not going to come in there and, against a great run defense, Akers isn't going to start putting up great numbers. It's just not going to happen. So he's still he's a little over a year back from his Achilles now. I think he's I was never very high on Akers. I wasn't high on Madison either. So if Akers does take the starting job, it's not going to surprise me. If Madison holds on to it and gets 60% of the workload, that won't surprise me either.
For the Panthers, Bryce Young cleared whatever protocols he was in. Looks like he is on track to start. Nothing has been a better salve for opposing quarterbacks this year than playing against the Minnesota Viking defense. Could this be a breakout week for Bryce Young?
What, he ups his YPA from 4.21 yards to 4.5 yards?
Yes.
I wanted to be, but there's nothing he's done in weeks 1 and 2 that show me that even against a terrible Minnesota defense, he's going to have the guts to go downfield. Mingo is out. Thielen.
Mingo is questionable. He may still play.
So it's the weapons aren't terrific there. And, I think Miles Sanders is questionable as well.
And that's more worrying to me. He's got a groin injury and didn't practice on Friday.
Right. So he's probably out. I'd like for Young to take a step. If he does take a step, I don't think it's going to be like a giant leap. I think it'll be very incremental. It's wild to be sitting here going, man, I really wish Andy Dalton was playing.
I know Andy Dalton probably go for 450 yards. I would think Adam Thielen might be interested in something of a revenge game too, but we shall see. I am still taking the Vikings. If the Vikings go 0-4 and lose to the Panthers, we're going to have to talk all the Viking fans off the ledge.
Yeah, I got the Vikings as well.
Next up, the 2-1 Pittsburgh Steelers at the 1-2 Houston Texans. Dennis, Deontay Johnson's still out. How do you like George Pickens?
I love Pickens. The Texans are giving up the 4th highest completion rate, and they're 28th in sack percentage, or 28th in sacks. Pickens is 24th in the NFL in first read percentage for receivers with a minimum of 70 routes. Would that be lower if Deontay Johnson was still healthy? Probably. And he's 78th in catchable target percentage. So while he's getting a good first read opportunity, and they're going up against a team that gives up passes, Kenny Pickett's got to get the ball on him a little better and throw him a more catchable ball. He had a big game against the Browns, but he had 4 receptions on 10 targets. Just happened to have that one. I'm going to call it a broken play, because there's no way you can be in the middle of 5 Browns defenders and none of them be within 10 yards of you and somebody not have blown a coverage.
For CJ Stroud, he had a big week 3. Unfortunately for him, Laramie Tunsil's out. Titus Howard's on IR. Their offensive tackle is also listed as out. But are you starting to like him in Superflex?
I am. I think Stroud is playing really well. He's pushing for high-end QB2 consideration, I think, on any given week, just based on the Texans giving him the volume. They're letting him throw the ball. Last week was his lowest attempts, and he had, 33 attempts? It's been over 40 both of the first 2 weeks. He's just got to start putting it in the end zone more, and I think Tank Dell might be the guy to help create that. Nico Collins is the big wide receiver. Robert Woods is still getting good volume. Stroud is 5th in attempts, 5th in completions, 5th in yards, and he has the 5th lowest turnover-worthy throw percentage. So he's taking care of the ball. I think he's got to kind of take that step now and be a little more aggressive to get it into the end zone, maybe make some plays to give his receivers an opportunity. Nico's what, 6'3", 6'4"? Robert Woods is 6'1". You got to give those guys a chance to make a play. And if you throw an interception, well, throw an interception. Just don't go all Jameis on us.
Just throw it to the moon and Tank Dell will run under it. I am surprisingly taking the Texans.
I'm going to go ahead and take the Texans too and profess my love for C.J. Stroud.
Up next, we move to the afternoon window games. First up, the 1-2 Las Vegas Raiders at the 1-2 Los Angeles Chargers. Dennis, Jimmy G is still considered very questionable in the concussion protocol. If he misses the game, how are you feeling about the Raiders?
Not great, Bob. It's, they know that. I think that Hoyer, I think Aiden O'Connell, they know the mission. The assignment is get the ball to Devontae Adams, get the ball to Jacoby Myers, get the ball to Josh Jacobs. Those are the only 3 guys. I think they'll, regardless of who the quarterback is, I think you start all 3 of those guys. But you kind of lower your expectations a little bit if Jimmy G isn't the guy.
For the Chargers, Austin Eckler looks like he's going to be out. Mike Williams on IR. We know we're starting Keenan Allen. What are you doing with the rest of the Chargers receivers?
So I like Palmer. I think he's firmly in the flex mix. He doesn't have a ton of upside. Like, I think he can get in the end zone, but he's not going to give you a high YPA. And he's been starting. So I don't think his role, the definition of his role, doesn't change with Mike Williams being out. I do think he absorbs a few of the targets that Mike Williams might have gotten until Quentin Johnston proves himself. So I'm not ready to just stick Quentin into my lineup, but I'd like to see how he does with this opportunity. Williams is 30 years old. He's going to be coming off a torn ACL, and I think they can cut him for $12.8 million, which isn't a terrible
It's chump change. I got that in my couch.
Yeah. So I like Palmer's opportunity, but he's a flex play pretty much.
I am taking the Chargers.
I'm going to take the Chargers too. The guy I worry about though, when it comes to the Chargers, is the old TD vulture Donald Parham.
Next up, the New England Patriots 1-2 at the 2-1 Dallas Cowboys. Aside from Ramondre Stevenson, is there any Patriot you're feeling good starting?
I think Henry's a fairly reliable tight end starter. He's in that tight end, I don't know, probably 10 to 15 range most weeks with a little bit of upside. Henry's not afraid to go, Mac Jones isn't afraid to go to him in the red zone.
He might be throwing it to himself. You never know.
Yeah, it could be. But he's pretty much the one. I don't think any of their other receivers Kendrick Bourne will give you a little bit, but he's inconsistent. He's a low end flex play at best. It's really just, we got to see how it shakes out for him. I don't know what's going to happen. It helps that the Cowboys don't have Trayvon Diggs, but they do have that monster pass rush and Micah Parsons, who's going for Defensive Player of the Year. So it could be a rough day for Mac.
It was a rough week for the Cowboys last week. Do you like them to have a bounce back game here?
Bill Belichick's defenses always play tough. And I guess theoretically, you want to say that the Cowboys are better, but then they went out and they lost a game they should have won, and it was like they were looking ahead. Belichick just gets his teams ready to play in big games, and I think at this point in the season, this is a big game. He doesn't want to go 1-3, and that defense is going to present Dak with some challenges, even without Diggs over there. So I like the Cowboys to win, but I think it's going to be an ugly game.
I am also taking the Cowboys, and as long as he, continues to feed Tony Pollard and CeeDee Lamb, I don't care. Next up, the last of the afternoon window games, the 1-2 Arizona Cardinals at the 3-0 San Francisco 49ers. Dennis, he's questionable this week with a little bit of a thumb injury, but we've seen Marquise Brown kind of get going the last couple of weeks. How are you feeling about him for fantasy?
Yeah, I think he's playing as good as you can on a team that just nobody really gave any credit to, including me. I thought they were going to be 0-3 at this stage, having been blown out all 3 weeks. James Conner and Josh Dobbs, Marquise Brown, they're rallying that team. The defense is playing hard. Right now, I think the biggest challenge for the Cardinals is they're just being out talented. I don't think getting Kyler Murray back fixes that problem. Well, it fixes it at the quarterback position, but it doesn't fix it in the rest of the at the other positions that they're weak, i.e., defense, offensive line, maybe. They're playing hard, and I think that's really all you can ask of Arizona is to go out and give a great effort, and they're doing that. James Conner, Trey McBride, and Zach Ertz, and Michael Wilson dropped a 69-yarder last week. By dropped, I mean caught it, put it on the board, kind of thing. So he only caught 2 passes, but it was over 80 yards. Wilson is stepping up into he's taken over the big receiver role for the Cardinals.
I mentioned it before, when we were talking about the Eagles, we do the receiver roulette with the 49ers. Brandon Ayuk, who missed last week, is now not on the injury report. Deebo Samuel listed as questionable. Juwan Jennings, doubtful. George Kittle also not on the injury report. How are you feeling, and how are you playing the 49er receivers?
I'm probably playing Mitchell, Elijah Mitchell. I think
he's
the
also
Niners,
on the injury report. He's
well,
listed.
then I'm playing Jordan Mason. I feel like the Niners are going to get up. The defense is going to, and it isn't like they're going to get up, 35-0. I feel like it's going to be more of we're not going to see the Cardinals be able to move the ball. They're going to try. The Cardinals are going to have to pass, which means that defensive line is going to pin their ears back, and they're going to put a ton of pressure on Josh Dobbs. And then the Niners are going to grind the ball out on the ground. They're going to take shots, but I don't think they're going to try to put up 70. Now, granted, I don't think Miami tried to put up 70. It just happened.
Let's not talk about it. Mitchell is officially listed as questionable, missed Friday's practice with a knee injury. So if you were thinking about playing him as a backup, I would watch on Sunday to see if he's active.
I'd pivot to Jordan Mason at that point.
I am taking the 49ers.
Yeah, and I'm taking the Niners too. There may be some garbage time points coming up because I think the Cards will be behind, and they're going to have to be throwing. So you may be able to get some points out of Wilson, out of Brown.
Next up, the 2-1 Kansas City Chiefs at the 1-2 New York Jets. Dennis, for Kansas City, is there a receiver you like to play this week?
So going into the season, one of my calls was Sky Moore is going to get 1,000 yards. He's second year in the system. He's going to have better chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. Well, Rashee Rice is kind of making me eat my words. Rice he's going out there and earning targets. He's played 32, 18, and then 51% of the snaps last week. Targets 5, 2 targets in week 2, but 7 targets last week. So Rice is going out there and demanding the ball and getting it. The offense still runs through Travis Kelce. I think it's going to stay that way. I know this Jets defense is tough, but with Zach Wilson at quarterback, I feel like we could be looking at an Isaiah Pacheco game.
For the Jets, a lot has been made of them not being able to run the ball or not committing to run the ball the last couple of weeks. Could we see them try to get Breece Hall going again here in week 4?
I mean, we could see them try to get anybody going. I mean, if Robert Saleh is looking at the film, he's got to see that Zach Wilson is struggling. I mean, the fact that their attempt to put a Band-Aid on the position was to sign Trevor Siemian is comical. I honestly think that if this season keeps going like it is for the Jets and they just keep sticking with Zach Wilson, it could be the end for Saleh and it could be the end for Joe Douglas, which would be which I don't think is great because I think Douglas has done some really good stuff bringing people in there, and losing Rodgers was a bad break. But man, you've got to address that. You can't just keep sticking your head in the sand and saying Zach Wilson is our guy because you might hurt his pretty little feelings.
Yeah, it is interesting. You could go one of two ways. Either losing Rodgers gives them a pass for the year because everything was built around that, or it ends up crippling them. Either way, I am taking the Chiefs.
So am I.
Monday Night Football this week is the Seattle Seahawks, who I just lost, I think, are 2-1 at the 1-2 New York Giants. Dennis, a lot of excitement when JSN was drafted this offseason, but we haven't seen him be a big factor. It's been mostly Metcalf with some good sprinklings of Lockett. How are you playing the wide receiver group for Seattle?
For me, it's Metcalf and it's Lockett, and then JSN is a distant third. Metcalf's getting the yards. Lockett has him 2 touchdowns to 1 touchdown, and that's kind of helped Lockett. But JSN is a low end flex right now. DK Metcalf is the guy I want.
For the Giants, we were very excited when they acquired Darren Waller. That seemed like a player that brought a certain set of skills to a team that was missing a certain set of skills, but we have not seen a great connection through the first 3 weeks. How are you feeling about Waller going into week 4?
I feel good about Waller. The production hasn't been where we want it, but he's leading the team in targets. He's leading the team in targets per route run. He's leading them in receptions. He's leading them in yards. He's second on the team in routes run. I mean, it just isn't converting to fantasy points right now, and it's not converting to NFL wins. I think part of that is losing Saquon Barkley. I think that really throws their offense out of whack. I feel like
he went back to practice today. He looks like he's tracking to play.
Yeah, and that's going to be helpful.
Incredibly helpful. Oh, you're saying having the best player would help an offense. Let me jot this down.
Hashtag analysis.
I know. I had such high hopes for Waller. I have him on a lot of teams. I would like to see. It's just last week the 5 points.
I mean, he's a tight end. That's what you get out of the tight end position, unless you got Travis Kelce.
But he's tight end on a team that doesn't have a receiver of note. But I guess, that's the whole 6 receptions for 24 yards for Paris Campbell, too, is their big receiver, which, makes it ironic. I've taken the Giants.
I'm going with the Seahawks. I picked against the Seahawks traveling east last week, and I think it bit me in the ass. I'm going to take them this week.
Well, that'll do it for the preview. We will be back on Tuesday. But Dennis, if people are feeling a little lost and discombobulated on Saturday, what can they do to fill those long, lonely hours?
They can go to their favorite mobile device, find their favorite podcast platform, and subscribe to their favorite podcast. And by that, I mean us, the Fantasy Football Roundtable. give us a rating, give us a review, help us move up those chartable charts there.
Well, we'll be back on Tuesday with a recap of all these games, plus a preview of a barn burner Week 5 Thursday night game, which features the Washington Commanders and the Chicago Bears. I bet Amazon is just sitting back wondering how they got that lucky. Hopefully you get lucky with your fantasy matchups this weekend. We will also have an update on the Roundtable League. It's all about Chubb's broken wheel.
It is.
You guys have a great weekend. Enjoy your Sunday.